Stop messing around, stop fooling around, stop delaying, stop procrastinating. Get up, get out, get it done. Everything is possible, nothing is a problem, and anything can be overcome. I just get my ass up out of bed, I get my shit together, and I get out and I start the fight. And that will transform you from a mere mortal into a superhuman being. I've never, ever, ever met anybody who told me that they got rich watching their IRA or their 401k.
Welcome to the Daily Cash Flow. My name is George Robson.
I'm Peter Siegel.
Peter, how has COVID affected commercial real estate?
Yeah, I mean, right now, every business, every location is being affected, so your question about commercial real estate is on point. You have to look at the asset class. So within commercial real estate, we have multifamily, we have retail, office, warehouse, industrial. So what we're seeing by and large is that the multifamily sector is performing much better than the other asset classes. There's certain parts of multifamily which are going to get hit worse. The upper end, the high end rentals are going to find that they're going to have more vacancies and they're going to have some price pressure.
What do you think that is?
Well, in a time of economic crisis, those who are stretching to afford a lifestyle that they might not have been really able to afford are going to feel some pinch. And we really, I think, tend to focus more on needs than wants. A high-end rental for most of the people in that market is a want, not a need. I think people in that market are going to decide that they can get the roof over their heads and the housing that they need for themselves or their family at a lower price point just as well. So we'll see a migration out of high-end luxury expensive rentals into more mid-price product.
That makes sense.
And I think that also the lower end of the multifamily market is certainly going to find itself slightly affected. Even more than the economic range of the multifamily asset that you're in is going to be the quality of the operator and manager that's in charge of running the building. Professional operators and managers are going to have far more success getting through a period like this. And the marginal operators, the ones who are lazy, asleep at the wheel, not deploying best practices, they're going to find their buildings slipping away. They're going to find their collections down, their vacancies up. They're going to find an inability to keep up with maintenance. They're going to find an inability to compete in the marketplace with other buildings like theirs that maybe are keeping up with all those things. So a lot of what dictates a multifamily building's success in a time like this is really driven by the operator and the manager of that property, for sure, 100%. In office buildings right now, most office buildings are shuttered. Some are open, some businesses are deploying some sort of version of a safe practice for people to show up.
But less consistent than it was.
Far less consistent. I mean, significantly less consistent. I mean, we're talking about 100% of the office sector is affected. Probably 70 to 80% of the office buildings in our communities are closed. The ones that are open house essential businesses, and those businesses have employees that are coming up and showing up to work in some modified fashion, some restricted fashion. Maybe if there was 200 employees coming to work, now there's only 20 because they have to maintain a distance. Oh, and by the way, the operators of those office buildings that are lucky enough to be open have a greater cost structure and expense profile right now because they need security, they need staff, they need cleaning, they need sanitizing, they need different types of certification or processes to now be in their buildings in order to make it safe for their tenants to be able to come to the building and show up to work. And clearly, the work from home thing is going to be a big part of our society.
A lot of people are calling this the work from home experiment to end all the work from home experiments.
Let me tell you, it's not an experiment. Yeah. It was part of our society for the past 8 to 10 years. Since the 2008 economic crisis, we started to see an increase in work from home. I can tell you that operating multifamily buildings, we see a greater number of our applicants who seek to come into one of our apartments have a work from home component to their job. So we've been seeing an uptick in work from home for the past decade or so. And I promise you it's going to be way more prevalent by 5-fold or 10-fold moving forward, to the point where companies are going to rethink the necessity to even have an office space and they're going to rethink if they need 100,000 square feet for hundreds and hundreds of employees, or if perhaps they can have one or two 20,000 square foot facilities in a suburb not far away, so that it reduces commute time, so that it reduces the footprint of the economics required to maintain big office space. Big office space is going to have a tough time, especially big office space in older buildings where the floor plates are all chopped up and enclosed with low ceilings. Those spaces are going to have a very, very, very tough time. Warehouse and industrial space, I think this is going to be a mixed bag. You have to choose your assets specifically and wisely. Warehouses and industrial spaces for essential businesses are going to thrive, and those rent payments are going to be made. Warehouse and industrial space for non-essential businesses that are out of business, that are shuttered right now, that are figuring out how to even come back, those rent checks aren't going into those building owners. So right now, as a commercial real estate owner, we're thinking about, am I getting rent? Where am I getting rent? When am I getting rent? Right. And how are my tenants going to be able to pay the rent? And what can I do to help them to be able to pay the rent? So it's a tough time for commercial building owners if you're in warehouse, industrial, office. And then the last one is retail. Right. Absolutely getting slammed right now for obvious reasons. No one's going out into a store. And look, malls have been having a tough time for the past decade anyway. We saw that as a fallout from the 2008 crisis. And these mall properties are largely being repositioned to become something else. Mixed use, retail centers, strip centers, forget about it. Big box, okay, they're gonna have a bit of a blip here, but they're gonna come back because these big box retailers are capitalized, they're public companies, many of them, and they're gonna be able to weather a lot of this. And ultimately, people are gonna need to go to Walmart. It's been deemed an essential business, so Walmart's kicking it right now. Yeah. But retail's a tough space. If you're the owner of a building with a small retail space, or if you're the owner of a small strip center, commercial center in your community, you don't have to call me and let me know. I already know you're having a tough time. Yeah, so as I see it, commercial real estate, as always, you have to pick your asset class, you have to pick your location, you have to pick your building, but be smart about it right now. Yeah. We're seeing multifamily being affected way less, if at all, compared to the other sectors.
Yeah, absolutely. On a basic level, what do you need to be successful in real estate investing?
I get this question a lot because we deal with people who invest in real estate. I invest in real estate. And so I tell people that there's 4 key things that you want to focus on if you want to become a real estate investor. One is you have to have a great asset and a great location. 2 is you have to have a business plan for that asset. You can't just sit idly by and hope and expect that that building's just going to wake itself up every morning and put itself to bed every night. You have to do it. It takes work. 3, you need capital because you need to buy the building, you need to fund the business plan. And then 4, and most importantly, I think once you've accounted for the first 3, is you need a local market expert who is seasoned and disciplined in operating commercial real estate through good times, through bad times, who has construction experience, legal experience, sales marketing, leasing experience, HR experience. There's a lot of facets that go into operating commercial real estate investment successfully. You want to make sure that you're covered in all of those facets. Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the operator as being key, and that kind of goes off of something you've spoken about before about you can have the greatest business plan in the world, but if you don't execute on it effectively, then it's not worth anything.
George, 1,000,000%. You got to be able to execute, not just in real estate, in any business. You have to be able to execute. Look, everyone's got an idea, but it doesn't matter because unless you can execute on that idea, your idea is worthless. So it all comes down to execution. Investors out there, they get pitched ideas all day. I mean, hundreds a month. Yeah. They don't need more ideas. They need people who can execute. So if you want to increase your odds of success in running your real estate investment, be able to execute. If you want to increase your odds in making a pitch to an investor for your idea, make sure you know how to execute. Yeah. If you want to be good at anything in business, you have to be able to execute. The world doesn't need more ideas. The world needs more people who can execute.
More executors. Yeah. Right now, we're hearing a lot of discussion about how this pandemic has hit older individuals particularly hard.
Sure.
Are there any other demographics that you feel like are vulnerable right now that you're seeing?
Well, I think you're referring to the older demographic that's been hit medically from the crisis, which we've all known about. And I certainly can't talk about a medical opinion on other age groups. But what I can talk about and what I am seeing is how the COVID-19 crisis has been affecting younger people, not medically, but I think what I'm seeing is that younger people, it's their first crisis.
Yeah.
They weren't prepared before this happened. They're not prepared now. And they find themselves, many of them, most of them, not working because they weren't in essential businesses. And it's an unknown thing. They're out of work. It's their first crisis. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do?
So
Right?
what do you do? What do they do? Do you have any advice for those groups of people that are hit like that?
Yeah, I would say for young people that are feeling the pain of this crisis financially, economically, employment-wise, learn how to pivot. Take this as an opportunity to pivot. Pivot away from your non-essential employment into something that's essential. And hey, when you get there, dedicate yourself to it, become an expert in it, gain a level of expertise, gain the level of skill sets that are needed to become an expert, work nights and weekends, add as much value as you can. Don't make this about what's in it for me. Make it about what you can deliver to your employer.
Adding value.
Add the value. And while this is all happening, you're going to solidify your place in an essential industry, providing expertise. I think you're going to lock yourself down for the long term. Also, while this is happening, learn how to manage money, because you're on the path now. Start investing, because you're on the path now. You got to start early with investing. We've spoken about that a lot here. Create a personal financial statement, update it every week, every month. Start measuring yourself economically, financially, because you can't manage what you don't measure. And develop those skills and habits now, because you're going to find that once you come out of this having pivoted into something essential, into something where you have expertise and you're adding value, you're going to find your financial path to be a lot brighter. Start investing.
Yeah.
Start gaining those benefits early.
Now, this reminds me, you're talking about pivoting here. It reminds me of something you've spoken about before. At certain times recently, you've discussed being able to pivot and the ability to change as being very valuable, not just right now, but at all times. But then simultaneously, you've also spoken about staying the course and being consistent.
You saying I'm contradicting myself?
I mean, are those two things contradictory in your mind?
I don't find those things contradictory at all. If you're on the path in business, if you're becoming successful, if you're already successful, if you're a leader, you have to constantly be evaluating and making decisions. We've spoken about that a lot. So sometimes it's the right move to forge on, stay the course and forge on. Sometimes it's the right decision to adapt, be agile. Maybe you've got some information that's pushing you in a different direction right now. Other times it's going to be the right decision to do nothing.
Do nothing at all.
Do nothing. Sometimes it's the right decision to do nothing. We feel a lot of pressure. Should I do this or this? Should I stay? Should I go? Sometimes the right decision is to do nothing. So I was recently in the financial markets during COVID shopping for some mortgage financing on a particular building that I was buying. The mortgage markets were all over the place. Interest rates were all over the place. I had a ready, willing, and able seller. I couldn't obtain the financing that I needed. There was uncertainty there. As an investor, we like certainty. I didn't have enough of a degree of certainty. I was getting new information every moment because interest rates were going all over the place. Spreads were tightening, spreads were easing. Banks were lending, banks were pulling back. So there was no real way for me to field the grounders that were being hit to me. So I couldn't adapt and change. I couldn't really stay the course because I didn't have enough certainty.
Yeah.
I decided to do nothing.
Yeah.
And for me, it was the right decision at the time. Now I can circle back to that particular opportunity and decide to buy it or not later, once spreads balance out, once rates flatten out, and once there's a little bit more certainty in the daily markets. But for now, I think doing nothing was the right thing to do.
Yeah. It wasn't just don't just stand there, do something. It was don't just do something, stand there.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
Look at you, George.
I think I stole that from somebody.
George, I think the next Daily Cash Flow is going to be with you here and me over there interviewing you.
Yeah. Well, and that's really all going back to that idea of developing that radar screen to see the opportunities or the lack of opportunity.
You got to be ready for that stuff. It comes at you every day. You never know where it's coming from. It could be life moments, it could be personal moments, it could be business moments. You got to be ready to know when those opportunities are there and when that information's coming.
Totally.
Yeah.
All right, well, home ownership. How has home ownership changed, and where do you see it going?
Look, home ownership used to be a benchmark of the American dream. Our grandparents, our parents, the baby boomer generation.
White picket fence,
100%. And we used to find that people who bought into that dream bought a home, picked a spot, plunked a bunch of money down, they got a 30-year mortgage, they lived in that house, they went to work every day, they paid off the mortgage over 30 years, they raised their family in that house, and after 30 years, they're in retirement or near retirement age, the kids are out of the house, the mortgage is now paid off, and they got a house that's worth a bunch of money. They can sell it, they can downsize, they can move to a condo in Florida. That's what we used to see. What we've been seeing for about the past 10, 11 years after the 2008 economic crisis was that there was a lack of liquidity that was emblematic of that crisis. That created a situation where it was very difficult to buy a home. Banks weren't lending, and new home buyers were shut out of the market. We saw the rental demands spike after the 2008 economic crisis. And then we had a bunch of fits and starts throughout the country. Certainly in our region here in the Northeast, you had Hurricane Sandy in 2012, where people were just getting on their feet after the 2008 crisis. Then Hurricane Sandy came, and it was a very tough time, especially for people in our area, New York, New Jersey, very tough time. And now here we are in COVID-19, where everyone's unemployed, people are having a tough time, businesses are shut, and banks, again, are at the central part of this discussion where can you get a loan? Are spreads widening? Are interest rates coming down? Well, sure, all of this stuff is happening, but banks are turning off the faucets a little bit, and spreads are widening, making it more expensive for new homeowners to get into purchasing a home. And so we're seeing that it's once again difficult to buy a new home, but more important than all that, George, young people today, the new breed, the new market of home buyers for the next 10, 20, 50, 60 years, my kids, my grandkids, my great-grandkids, by and large are going to be buying homes way less. Sure, there's going to be pockets, locations, certain income brackets, certain areas that are always going to be a little strong and a little hot, and people are going to be buying homes there. By and large, the mass numbers,
Shifting towards renting.
Absolutely. We're in a long-term renter nation. You've heard me say that several times here, but I want to tell you why we're in a long-term renter nation. Young people want flexibility, they want mobility, they want an ease of fluidity. They don't want to have whatever capital they have. It may be a little, it may be a lot.
Or we just talked about how they don't have a lot right now.
They don't have a lot. So whatever capital they have, they're not going to want to lock down, tie down, and anchor down into some house somewhere that they have to fix, pay taxes on, pay insurance on, maintain, do the landscaping, pay the gardener, fix the pool. I mean, all that stuff. Remember, the cost of home ownership is not just your mortgage payment.
Right.
It's not just the price of buying the house. It's all of these other things which crush the whole economic analysis of why you should have bought the home in the first place. Young people aren't looking to get into that situation. They want the flexibility and mobility, change from coast to coast. I'm going to go to San Francisco. I'm going to move in with my girlfriend or boyfriend in New York or the New York area. I'm going to try a job here. I'm going to change my career and try this job. I'm going to move from a non-essential industry to an essential industry. And so that's what's happening with younger people.
And pass the liability off to, to landlords.
It's the way you win. Renting is the way you win. Home ownership is not the way you win anymore. It used to be.
Right.
For young people. Young people. I'm 51 years old. I own my home. At 21, I didn't own my home, and at 31, I didn't own a home. But at 51, I own a home. But for young people in their 20s and 30s, it used to be that's how you win, was to buy a home. Now for young people in their 20s and 30s, the way you win is you rent. Something goes wrong, you pick up the phone and call the landlord.
Well, because that allows you to invest your assets in other ways to compound 100%. Early on.
Get started early with investing. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, and that's how, with houses, that's why buying a house so young at that time made sense, was you were compounding value at that point, but that's no longer the case. And so
Well,
now it makes more sense to allocate
right.
those assets elsewhere.
We used to think that the housing market was untouchable. We used to think, oh, real estate always goes up. Oh, the price of homes always go up. What have we seen in the past 12 years? No, it doesn't. It doesn't.
That's not to be true.
And as a young person, why do you want to lock up whatever money you have in a home where if you change your mind, or if you lose your job, or if you change your job, or if you need to change your job, you can't because you're tied into this behemoth of an asset. You can't get out of it. Now you have to fly across the country for your new job, whatever your situation is, and you still own this house. You got to carry it. You got to rent it out. Now you got a renter in your house. Maybe that's working out. Maybe it's not. But I promise you that for the months that the renter is there paying you rent, it's probably okay. But for the months that they're not there paying you rent, you're pretty stressed. Yeah. So home ownership is not the same discussion as it was 15, 20, 30 years ago for our parents, longer than that for our grandparents. And moving forward, the name of the game is mobility, flexibility, and ease. And home ownership is none of those things.
Right. For you personally, Peter, what do you feel like sets you apart in this industry from other people that are working?
Having cut my teeth in the real estate markets in New York City for almost 30 years and having a Wall Street background, and also rolling up my sleeves and going into my properties every day, I think that that's probably the main point of difference that I tend to think about when asked. A lot of the competition that I have in my particular industry are either very heavily skilled in asset management. So these are people that are educated, that had some sort of corporate job or bank job, and they manage a building or portfolio of buildings from behind a desk somewhere. And they push off property management onto some third-party property manager as if it were some annoying bug that they were trying to get rid of. And they just sit behind their desk on the 27th floor of their office building. Well, not now during COVID, but before COVID, managing their buildings and managing their portfolio. That's an asset manager. You can read how to do that in a book, and that's what all these guys have done. And I promise you that 99% of those people have not rolled up their sleeves and gone into the buildings and fought the fight and been in the trenches and received the phone calls about leaky toilets and then fixed the leaky toilets and knocked on doors door to door during a crisis, offering communication, offering information, offering a presence for your residents to feel some sense of comfort, putting up hand sanitizer and disinfectant wipe stations in laundry rooms and entryways for your residents' safety, for your employees' safety, because you still have to send employees in to go manage and operate and maintain buildings. And so that's a key point of difference for me, is that I'm both an asset manager and a property manager, whereas I think a lot of other people that are operating multifamily buildings are really just asset managers.
And that separates them from the community that they're serving at the end of the day.
It separates them from their customer. It makes them less effective, because you really have to. We talked about the advice for young people, gaining a skill set, gaining expertise. Well, a lot of my peers in the multifamily industry have a great amount of expertise doing asset management. They have zero expertise doing property management. That's where all the value is. That's where the day-to-day is. That's where the money comes in. That's where the bills get paid. That's where you can find margin, right? In business, we talk about the all valuable, the all godly gross margin or margin, right? Well, that's where the margin is in multifamily, is being in the heart of it. And if you're asset managing, you're looking at reports going, oh, the numbers are down this month versus last month. I mean, you're already missed the boat at that point if you're looking at a report. I'm in the thick of it. I oversee daily operations for all property management functions: sales, marketing, leasing, financing, acquisitions, dispositions. I'm taking care of asset management, property management, human resource management, resident management. Now, I've got a very competent team assisting me with all these functions, and I have people reporting directly to me that oversee various aspects of those functions.
But your hands-on experience allows you to interface with those people effectively.
Absolutely, and that's where the value is. I mean, if you want to invest with someone who went to Wharton, who sits at a desk working a day job, but they've put together a deal to buy some building, and they're going to have some third-party guy property manage that building for 3 or 4% of the monthly collections, I guarantee you it's going to be a flat investment at best, a bad investment at worst, and you're going to be looking for ways to put your money to work in real estate that are different than that decision you made. Or you can put your money with a seasoned local market expert who has an existing infrastructure, who can run multifamily or commercial real estate assets, and who can bring value, who's an expert in construction, legal, sales and marketing, resident relations, investor relations, construction. These are all the things that come into the day in and day out of operating multifamily property. And unless you execute on those things, you're just another glorified asset manager sitting behind a desk.
Right.
So who do you want to invest with? How do you want to deploy your capital?
Yeah. The choice is yours.
Yeah.
These are uncertain times. A lot of people are stressed out about that. Have you found any particular ways that have been helpful for you to deal with uncertainty right now, Peter?
I haven't been stressed out, and I don't let things like a crisis like this stress me out. In fact, they push me to rise up and take charge and problem solve and lead my business and run my business. So I haven't really been in the position of where I've needed to make myself feel better, or I've needed to coddle myself, or I've needed to pet myself so I can sleep better at night. I don't have time for that. We got to wake up, get out, get it done, do our jobs, and that's what I've been doing. I don't know what other people have been doing. I'm sure it's very scary for a lot of people out there, but it's a luxury that I don't have. I have to run my business, and I have to thrive through this, and I have to survive through this, and I have to expand and grow through this. And people rely on me, my employees, my staff, my residents, my family, everyone relies on me. So I haven't really had a lot of opportunities to try and make myself feel better, because I didn't really feel bad to begin with. Yeah. I hope that answers your question. I'm not sure if that's what you were looking for. But also, to your point about times of uncertainty. As investors, we like certainty. Markets like certainty, investors like certainty. Yeah. So I can appreciate that certainty as something that we're all seeking all of the time. And we should never be afraid to offer up something in exchange for gaining some certainty. Look, the fact that we're looking for certainty doesn't mean that things are certain. And sometimes we think that there are guarantees and there are certainties in life. It's an illusion. There aren't. And we can see that right now. I'm thrilled that as a real estate investor that I'm in the multifamily asset space, because there is more certainty there than exists, I think, in most other places. Yeah. So if I'm an investor, which I am, and if I'm in business, which I am, I'm seeking a place that's got more certainty for me, so that's where I am, is in multifamily. So while there are no guarantees and while there are no certainties ever, multifamily real estate offers me a higher degree of certainty than I've ever experienced with any other business or any other investment in my life. And I'm happy that that's where I'm focused during this tough time.
That's great. All right, well, thank you for sharing, Peter.
Thanks,
Appreciate
George.
you taking the time, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you.